The Middle East ceasefire agreement does not forge peace. It merely shifts the battlespace. Do not be deceived by diplomatic statements. The April 2026 intelligence report indicates that Tehran is pivoting from kinetic conflict to strategic deterrence. Although the guns on the ground have temporarily fallen silent, Iran has just delivered a geopolitical counterattack, threatening to blockade the Strait of Hormuz via an anti-access/area denial, a 2/AD strategy. The IRGC's coastal anti-ship missile systems, naval mines, and fast attack craft swarm tactics remain on high alert, ready to counter Washington's embargo chokehold. This is an escalation beyond conventional warfare. Hormuz is the strategic jugular that controls 20% of the global oil supply. Squeezing this choke point is a devastating asymmetric economic warfare strike. The current radio silence is not peace. It is purely a tactical pullback to consolidate formations before a new round of combat. Strategic analysts do not evaluate the current agreement as peace, but define it as a tactical pause. The reduction in kinetic combat intensity stems purely from localized logistical exhaustion. All parties are fully exploiting the truce to reorganize their formations, restore supply chains, and replenish their ammunition allowances, completely devoid of any diplomatic goodwill. The core of the instability lies in Washington's maximum pressure strategy. Despite publicly supporting the ceasefire, the U.S. maintains the status quo of its sanctions chokehold and the blockade posture of the Fifth Fleet in the Gulf. The operational logic is crystal clear. Lifting the blockade would create a strategic loophole, providing a golden window for Tehran to re-equip its military hardware and recover its financial capabilities. The Pentagon and the U.S. Treasury are synchronizing economic warfare as an instrument of coercion, aiming to extract comprehensive concessions rather than a temporary armistice document. However, Tehran has responded with the ultimate asymmetric deterrence, an ultimatum to blockade the Strait of Hormuz. While intelligence assessments might classify this move as psychological operations, PSYOPS, aimed at manipulating oil prices and indirectly pressuring NATO allies and the Indo-Pacific region, reality dictates that this is Iran's red line. When its economic survival space is eradicated, Tehran is fully capable of activating its anti-access/area denial, A2/AD, capabilities in Hormuz. The current ceasefire ultimately is merely a suppression of tensions prior to a full-scale escalation campaign. The Strait of Hormuz theater of operations does not possess the characteristics of open waters. Geographically, it is a strategic choke point with a traffic separation scheme, TSS, offering a navigable width of just 3 kilometers in either direction. Yet, this sea line of communication, SLOC, dictates 20% of the world's traded crude oil output. Whoever maintains fire control over Hormuz holds the power to impose energy security terms on the entire Eurasian landmass. If Tehran launches a blockade campaign, they do not need a blue water navy. The narrow operational environment at Hormuz is the ideal condition for the IRGC's asymmetric anti-access/area denial, a 2/AD doctrine. A multi-layered interception formation will be activated. A network of unconventional naval mines laid in deep water channels, swarm tactics by fast attack craft squadrons, FAC/FIAC, and a net of anti-ship cruise missile ASCM fire from underground bunkers. This area will immediately become a no-go zone for any very large crude carrier, VLCC. Logistical rerouting options are unviable. Backup oil pipelines through Saudi Arabia or the UAE are already operating near their design thresholds, completely lacking the spare capacity to compensate. Once the SLOC through Hormuz is severed, The rupture of the global energy supply chain is a mathematical inevitability, not a theoretical forecast. The fallback option is simply zero. The impact of the presence of carrier strike groups, CSG, and forward-deployed fleets in the Gulf on the civilian economy is a direct correlation equation. If the red line at the Strait of Hormuz is breached and a blockade is activated, the global energy market will face a severe supply shock, far exceeding the salvage capabilities of strategic petroleum reserves, SPR. The disruption of transit flows will immediately reprice crude oil futures contracts, generating extreme volatility in the spot market. The entire heavy industrial infrastructure across the Eurasian axis, regions with critically low strategic energy autonomy margins, will be forced to instantaneously scale back production capacity to avoid a cash flow collapse. The severing of the sea line of communication, SLOC, at this jugular will immediately trigger a hyper-accelerated cycle of cost-push inflation. Systemic risk is not limited to extraction corporations. The market's panic response will drive bunker fuel costs and war risk premiums for all commercial vessels to record ceilings. This pass-through effect will strike the global logistics network directly, skyrocketing core operational costs from metallurgy, chemicals, and fertilizers to the entire agricultural supply chain. The inevitable consequence is a ruthlessly established new baseline for the Consumer Price Index, CPI, directly eroding real purchasing power and retail market liquidity. The general public often harbors the illusion of a safe firewall between kinetic conflict and personal financial security. However, in modern decentralized warfare doctrine, no actual buffer zone exists. Every shift in the defense readiness condition, DEFCON, at the Pentagon or tactical deployment by the Quds Force is instantly quantified into macroeconomic risk. Geopolitical escalation does not remain confined to intelligence reports. It strikes directly through retail fuel prices, utility bills, and the stagnation of civilian freight rates. In this widespread form of economic warfare, civilian sector assets are where the heaviest collateral damage is absorbed. No one can stand outside the risk perimeter, as every firepower fluctuation on the battlefield is directly repricing their own wallet. To summarize the situation, the current ceasefire is purely a tactical pause, not the end state of the conflict. As long as the center of gravity in the Washington-Tehran strategic friction remains unresolved, the Hormuz chokepoint will sustain a maximum risk of kinetic escalation. In the coming phase, the primary front shifts to the diplomatic space. The core issue is whether political concessions have enough latitude to prevent the rupture of the sea line of communication, SLOC, or if the global macroeconomic system will be forced to absorb the worst supply shock of the decade. The boundary between maintaining deterrence and all-out war is shrinking significantly. Leave your thoughts in the comments section below. Is the Hormuz blockade plan an imminent kinetic operation or purely a psychological operations, PSYOPS, strike from Tehran? Hit like, share, and subscribe to the channel for continuous updates on routine intelligence reports and strategic analysis. Thank you, and goodbye.